Good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Quarterly stats, it's long been called for. Do you think it's a really good idea?
Yeah, no. It's an excellent idea. We had it in the late 90s, but it's very good that we have it back again. And I must congratulate the National Commissioner, the government, to finally implement this, which was already a decision taken in 2016. I really hope that all our analysts and all the researchers in this country will now start to use it. I think it was a tremendous step forward.
Yes, and of course that's why we have crime stats, so that we understand where to focus policing. Can we, though, realistically draw any lessons from this particular lockdown crime quarter? Because surely it's an anomaly. It was all locked down. Everyone was sitting at home. Surely it's not useful in terms of data and planning and policy making.
Yeah, no, it's very useful. And we can already, since it was released 2 o'clock this afternoon, about 3 o'clock I started to analyze this data. And I will continue for the next few weeks till the next release. And there's quite a few lessons that we can learn. One of the lessons is clearly that this abnormal lockdown, where people didn't move from work to home and from home to work, and they were basically locked in their house, actually created a situation where the criminals were also locked down. And they didn't have much opportunity to commit the crime. Now, I know the minister again referred to alcohol, and he did quite a few references to alcohol. But actually, the data that they released this afternoon tells you an opposite story. Alcohol play a role. We must not make a mistake. It play a role, but not as significant as that they want to make out. There's clear indications in the briefing document of this afternoon that the main factor which affect our murders, for example, is robbery in our streets, in our public places. That is where most murders are committed, followed by the violent reaction, the mob reaction on that. That is very clear from this data.
All right, of course, we also know that a lot of murders happen through people having arguments. So obviously, as you say, it can happen with a mugging gone wrong in a street situation. But murders also occur in the home with people you know, and it's very common that someone you know ends up murdering you.
No, that is also happening. But if we look at the figures that was released this afternoon, the major figures was actually robbery in the street. And it was street robbery, house robbery, business robbery, and then followed by mob reaction. The arguments between people is about a third, while the other two are about a third each. So clearly this data doesn't show us that arguments is the main contributor to murder. And then also, even if we look at those arguments, not all of the arguments is between people who have too much to drink. It may also be just arguments about many different issues, and people will still kill each other.
It's interesting what you say, that you're already starting to crunch the data, and you're saying that clearly criminals were also locked down, so they couldn't move around as freely. You talk about street robberies which go wrong and end up in murder. Both of those point to limiting our freedom to move around. That is simply not realistic. That can't happen. So how useful is that information? That's obviously what the data shows you, but how useful is that as a lesson, something that we can apply going forward to policy?
Well, I think it is extremely important, because if you can address the correct generators, the correct conditions of murder, for example, and that it is street robbery, and that it is happening at late in night when people travel from restaurants, where they work, or shops where they work, and they arrive this time of the year in the dark at home, and then they have to walk a kilometer to their shack. That is where these things occur. Now, if you know that, you can prevent that. It is preventable.
Can you prevent it if you've only got like 190,000 cops and 58 million South Africans to look after?
Yeah, but at a station level, these crimes are also analyzed. This data are also analyzed and in much more detail because they have got more detailed analysis. And then they can establish. I mean, I've seen it when I was at the police and when I was in charge of this specific section, that you can analyze and find out where does my street robberies occur, at what time, and why is it occurring at that place, at that time, and then you can prevent it. The same with hijacking, the same with many other crimes.
So much more targeted policing, so using the limited resources you have in very key areas. And of course, that is why it's so important that we get the data every quarter and it comes out very quickly. One of the other things I wanted to raise with you is the lack of trust in police. Gareth Newham of the ISS was saying on our channel earlier that I think it's only 1 in 9 rapes is reported. And that speaks to potentially that women are just... They don't trust the police. They don't want to go through the system. They don't feel they'll be sympathetically received. With all the crime stats there to help develop the right strategies, does that underreporting of crimes like rape suggest that there needs to be a development of other skills amongst the members of the police?
Yeah, I think the trust factor is important, especially in these crimes like rape, your sexual offences. It's a very intimate crime. It's a crime, I mean, people will not, even if there's a good relationship with the police, people in many countries, there is a high underreporting of that specific crime. But I think trust must be built. And I think what must happen in South Africa, especially when it comes to the sexual offences, when it comes to these assaults, the GBV violence, the GBV, then in that specific cases, it should happen that trust should be built and that people should know that when they go on a Friday evening to the police to complain about a boyfriend or a husband who have just assaulted them, that the police will not try to play a reconciliatory role, but must take the case, investigate the case, and that person, the perpetrator there, must be punished eventually by court.
Absolutely. You retired in, I think, 2013, so you were in the police during the time of the Marikana massacre. Of course, we know on Sunday it's the 8th anniversary since that awful and shameful event. I'm just wondering, from your perspective now outside the force, whether you're seeing signs that the police are plotting a better path, changing the culture within the ranks.
Yeah, it's difficult to see from outside. And I think that there's still a long way to go if we look at what happened during the lockdown. Well, it's still lockdown, but at the earlier levels of the lockdown, things that the police have done wrong there. And I think this is a culture which has to be instilled over a long period of time. I think police should be trained better to not see them as somebody who is also taking a step to suppress certain crimes, or, they are not a court. They are not the justice officer. They are a person who are there to prevent crime in the first place, and then when crime occurs, to investigate it and then take it to court.
Well, thank you very much for your views this evening, Dr. Chris de Kock. He's an independent crime analyst. Also, he headed up the police's Crime Information Analysis Centre for nearly 20 years before retiring in 2013.